Let's go for it!
Everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave, the host here at the Dark Stuff channel on YouTube. Thanks a lot for checking out the new video. Today's video is the next in line in my new series about best debut albums. Hopefully you've been liking it so far. In today's, we're going to talk about the 1988 debut album from New York City's Living Colour. It's called Vivid. I fell in love with this record and this band instantly in 1988 when I first heard the band. Now, my musical history is that as a teenager in the 80s, I grew up mostly like a hard rock and heavy metal kid. But by the time I hit like 17, which is about 1988, I started longing for something more in the music. I still wanted a heaviness, I still wanted that sort of intensity, but I couldn't stand the stupid, you know? Like what was going on, what we now call hair metal, was all of these bands, they were trying to look the same, act the same. All the songs were just about chicks or partying or whatever, and like that's okay for a little bit, but like you got to be able to go beyond that. And as I was learning new things and I was expanding my musical horizons, I started getting into bands like The Replacements and Husker Du, and coming up with Jane's Addiction and Faith No More, and a number of great bands that were Fishbone, and a number of great bands that were coming along at that time. So for me, when Living Colour first came out, I was like the demographic for this band, and it was the perfect timing for me because I was kind of transitioning in a musical sense from strictly like a heavy metal background and loving, you know, Rat and Motley Crue and Van Halen and Kiss and all of that stuff. And I still love that 80s stuff. It's just like by the time I hit 87, 88, I couldn't take it anymore. Living Colour had that heaviness. They had great riffs. They had great musicianship, you know, all of that stuff. Cult of Personality, the kickoff single, and basically the band's signature song, is an amazing hard rock / heavy metal, you know, classic. It's a bona fide classic. If you look, it's got like 70, 80 million spins on Spotify, so it still even connects with younger people today. Great fucking song. So when that first came out, it was like, this is what the doctor ordered, right? I mean, I love this song. I connected with it on a lot of levels. You know, I also connected with it on an intellectual level to a certain degree because, you know, they're using sound bites from Malcolm X and John Kennedy, and they're mentioning Mussolini and Gandhi and all this stuff. And it's just not what you normally hear in rock lyrics, especially in the 80s. I mean, the 80s was, you know, everything was supposed to be like very surface level and not, you know, you don't go too deep, you know, unless you're U2, and you're allowed to do that, the band U2, Bono. Unless you're U2, they can be deep in the 80s. Everybody else has to be just about, you know, partying and chicks and whatever. Still my original first wave CD from 1988. I do need an upgrade because I know it's been released in an expanded form with a couple extra tracks and some live recordings and stuff. I have all of the singles from back then, so any bonus tracks I probably have. I have the Japanese Biscuits with all the extra songs, but you know, I digress. Okay. So this album was produced by Ed Stasium for the most part, and Mick Jagger did a couple of songs. And the Mick Jagger thing is interesting because the first time that I ever saw Living Colour on TV, on MTV, Vernon Reid looked very familiar to me. I didn't know where I'd seen him, you know, but I'm like, I've seen this dude. And it turns out that it was a live video of Mick Jagger because he was Mick Jagger's guitar player. I don't know if he played on records, but he was definitely a touring guitar player. So having a friend like Mick Jagger in your corner was, I'm sure, very helpful back in 87, 88 when Living Colour was getting signed and doing this record. Now, Ed Stasium, I know, was a well-known producer in the 80s, and I worked on some Ramones stuff as well as a number of other great bands. This album perfectly melds a number of different styles in that I mentioned the hard rock stuff. They also do have elements of what you consider like, classic soul or R&B. You've also got elements of jazz, especially in the way Vernon Reid plays guitar. Of course, you've got funk in there. They have a great bass player, Muzz Skillings. The original bass player, he left after the second album, was replaced by a guy named Doug Wimbish, who's been in the band for the rest of the time. But this was still the Muzz era when they did that record. So they're mixing the hard rock, they're mixing the funk, they're mixing jazz and a bunch of other elements at the time, which was almost completely unheard of. One of the things that Living Colour brought to the table that some of maybe these other groups didn't back then was just their breadth of influence. They've done cover songs, like on this record, they do Memories Can't Wait by Talking Heads. They've also covered Per Ubu, talk about obscure punk rock. They've covered The Clash. They've covered Bad Brains. Just a band that melds, pushes those kinds of styles together, styles and influences together, is automatically going to be pretty interesting. The fact that you can take those styles, hold them, and write catchy songs that aren't going to be so abrasive to the normal mainstream record buyer or whatever, because it does have a nice production. It's not overproduced, it's well produced. The sound of the instruments all sound great. Vernon's guitar sounds just sick. It's amazing. Pretty much every song on the record. There's a lot of really good message songs. There's just some sort of fun songs too. The only one I would say that I don't really dig that much is I Want to Know, which is the second song. Surprising that it's put up so close to the front, because Cult of Personality obviously kicks off the album. But then I Want to Know just seems like kind of substance free. It's poppy. It's poppy. It's all right. But in comparison to the rest of the record, it's kind of forgettable. Then they go into Middleman, Killer, another really heavy song. Desperate People, Open Letter to a Landlord is a really, really deep song. It was a single for them, addressing sort of gentrification in certain neighborhoods, and when people, developers go in and take over old neighborhoods, knock down old houses, and supposedly pay their people fairly for their property and whatnot. But just the changing things, and people want to hold on to that. Funny Vibe is a great song that really deals with something that I myself, as a white kid growing up in Omaha, wasn't always so aware of in the 1980s. And this thing that there's this perception that that black people sort of feel like stared at or looked at or judged in some way. Even Barack Obama talked about it before he became president or right after he became president, talking about how when he went into an elevator and women would kind of clutch their purse, worrying, like, is this black guy going to rob me or something? And where does that come from? Why do people have that? Why? That's the thing. Why are you going to give me that funny vibe? Why are you going to assume that I'm not going to do that? I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just a normal person. And I think when the first time I heard that, it did educate me. Not that I thought otherwise or anything, but I mean, it just sort of felt like, oh yeah, maybe they feel like when people do that sort of thing, yeah, that's insulting on a certain degree, but it's also just like, why would you do that, And the fact that it's still prevalent today, or at least happens today, I don't know about prevalent, I'm not really sure. I don't have any experience on that. So why you want to give me that funny vibe? The rest of it, we got Memories Can't Wait, which is the Talking Heads cover, which is fantastic. Broken Hearts is a really good kind of poppy, funky song. Glamour Boys, it's a sillier song. It's one of the ones that Mick Jagger produced. I've, in 30 plus years of listening to this record, I don't really understand what they're talking about. I mean, the Glamour Boys, and then they're saying, I ain't no glamour boy, I'm fierce. I don't know. I never really understood it. It's not my favorite song, but I kind of like it anyways. It's funky. It's a good song. What's Your Favorite Color? Theme song. And then Which Way to America is another really overtly political song, just talking about how the difference of impression that people see America. Like, how do I get to the America that you know, average white guy gets versus the America that I have grown up in and am forced to live in. And this was topical in 1988, and it's still topical now in 2021, sadly, you know. I liken this with another record that I'd heard the year before, and that was, maybe it was the same year, I'm not even, no, yeah, it was the year before. From Public Enemy, It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. I've talked about this on previous videos about how that Public Enemy record was a huge eye-opener for me and was like an education. It was like a textbook, you know. In addition to that record being sonically brilliant, there's just so much going on with the lyrics and so, you know, educating to a white suburban kid from Nebraska who grew up harboring no prejudices or anything like that. We had school busing here, no problems. I wasn't taught any of that kind of bullshit in my house. You know, I was in a tolerant house, but at the same time, you don't know. You still can learn and whatever. I never knew much about, you know, Malcolm X or the Black Panthers or any of this stuff, you know, and the government killing these guys. And anyways, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but with Living Colour, I kind of felt like I was also getting a little bit of that education, especially with Cult of Personality, Which Way to America, Open Letter to a Landlord, Funny Vibe. You know, I was learning something else. In addition to the learning, of course, the album is just fantastically played on all fronts. First of all, I've mentioned how great Vernon Reid is on guitar. I mean, a totally unique player. He can shred. He can come up with great riffs. He can also do like funkier stuff. He can do a clean tone sound. In some of the later stuff, he was doing a lot of clean tone. Anyways, he just can come up with all sorts of different sounds. I mean, on the third album, Stain, he's got this like guitar synthesizer sort of sound on some of the tracks. Auslander, I think, is the one I'm thinking of. Anyways, a very versatile guitar player. I know has a jazz background. Did some work with Mick Jagger, as we know, and got Jagger to produce. But just the first time I saw Living Colour in concert, the first time I saw them was actually in opening for the Rolling Stones in November of '89. But when I would watch them on TV is more what I'm thinking. The first time I saw them, I was transfixed by Vernon, mostly because I would watch his hands on the guitar. Like, I couldn't believe he has these really long fingers and like he's just doing this crazy shit. And when he does the solo, he was like picking like way up on the neck and stuff and like not down where the pickups usually are. And his fingers were moving so fast. I was like transfixed by it. He could shred and all that, but he didn't sound like all the heavy metal guitar players of the day, right? Like, that's the jazz element, the free jazz, the sort of the freak out stuff that shows more of an element of punk rock and jazz, you know, like almost like a mix of, I don't know a good jazz reference, but somebody like Greg Ginn or whatever is a punk rock reference, or Bob Mould or somebody like that. Vernon is just really tight, very solid. The last time I saw Living Colour, because I saw them open for the Stones, I saw them do a headline show, and I saw them on the first Lollapalooza in Bonner Springs, Kansas, that first one with Jane's Addiction and Susie and the Banshees and Rollins Band and Butthole Surfers and all that, and that was great. But then that was probably the last time I saw them was 92. No, that was in 90, so it was probably 91 or so. Was the last time I saw them until 2013 when they played on Halloween at my brother's club here in Omaha called Waiting Room. I was going to say Living Room. No, it's Living Colour Waiting Room is the name of the club. And it was fantastic, and I stood right in front of Vernon, and I just fixated on his fingers most of the show, you know? It was Halloween, and Corey Glover came out wearing like was a Jason mask. Is he the character that puts the hockey mask over his face? And it was cool, but I think he had to take it off pretty quickly because he realized you can't really sing very well through a plastic mask. It's kind of blocking all the voice that's supposed to be coming out of you. So, anyways, I went off on a tangent there, but watching him was so incredible, and that was always what I get focused on because I'm a failed guitar player. I mean, I tried when I was a kid. I just couldn't make it work. Corey Glover, of course, is the singer, and he has one of the best voices in rock history. There's no question. if he could have done, you know, like the classic soul R&B type of singer. He has that element to his voice, but he also has this amazing rock sound and just this incredible range. And to think that he almost wasn't the first choice for Living Colour, which I heard a story that when those two met, when Vernon and Corey Glover met, he had heard him sing and said, all right, well, listen, you want to come down and audition for my band? We're looking for a singer. He came down, Corey did, liked what he heard, did an audition, and Vernon Reid basically said, look, it's between you and another guy, and, you know, we're going to make a decision in 2 weeks, and we'll call you. And then he never called. And then I guess a couple months down the line, he did call and say, hey, our singer can't make it to a gig coming up. Could you maybe fill in for him? And now, of course, it's realizing he was the second choice. He wasn't the one they picked initially, but it didn't matter because from that fill-in gig onward, he's been the singer of Living Colour. So it was obviously a wise choice because you couldn't do better than that guy. His voice still holds up extremely well. I've seen videos from them performing as recently as 2021 on YouTube, and his voice is just stellar. It's like it hasn't aged a minute. And remember, 1988 was 33 years ago when that first Living Colour record came out. I mentioned Buzz Skillings on the bass, really talented guy. I think he played like a 5-string bass. And the new guy, Doug Wimbish, new guy, he's been in the band decades. But anyways, I think he did like a 5 or 6-string bass, or 8. I mean, I don't know. It looks like crazy amount of strings. I've never actually counted them. But they're both exceptional players. Again, this was the Muzz era. He did a really good job on this record. And the drummer, Will Calhoun, solid fucking drummer, really just can play in any of the myriad of styles that the band engages in on this record, Vivid. The first time I saw them on television, besides MTV, I remember seeing them on the Arsenio Hall show, and they did an amazing set. Well, I don't know if they did a whole set, but they did more than one song. And I remember during Cult of Personality, Corey Glover was wearing like his like body glove clothes that he used to wear, the real bright colors, you know. And he had the long braids and everything. And he goes running in the crowd and getting in the face of like scared white people in the audience who were like the studio audience first. And it was very, very funny, you know, because he's just singing right in their face. And they're probably like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? He's singing right in my face. But it was pretty hilarious, but it was an incredible performance. And again, he's just so engaging as a front man and so just out there. And all the live videos that I've seen and the times I've seen them in concert, he's fantastic on that front. I saw him live at the Apollo and also on this thing called the American Rock Awards, which took place in 1989. And I think it was like an attempt to make a new version of the Grammys or of the American Music Awards or something. So they tried this American Rock Awards, and the first year it had Living Colour, The Replacements, David Bowie's Tin Machine, it had Lou Reed, it had a whole bunch of other bands. It was a really, really great show. It was sort of stupid. They gave out trophies that were Elvis, and both Living Colour and The Replacements kind of made fun of that, you know, like why is this the trophy is Elvis? But you know, it's neither here nor there. So, you know, back then, a lot was made in the music press and in the media of Living Colour being a black rock band. And if you notice, I'm mentioning this at the end of the video, not at the beginning, okay? Because it's pretty obvious if you look at them. But people were so, like, not freaked out, but just, like, surprised. Whoa, these black guys play rock and roll, you know? It's like, yeah, of course. Had you never heard of Jimi Hendrix, or had you never heard of Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy? So, you know, Vernon Reid did have this thing called the Black Rock Coalition. He was trying to advance the cause of black rock bands because besides Living Colour, you know, there was Fishbone, and, you know, later on came 24/7 Spies, and I don't know if you consider King's X a black rock band, but the singer was black, Doug, and he was great. And, you know, they're trying to show that, you know, you don't have to have this stereotypical view of not all black artists are doing the exact same thing. And I don't know why people would have trouble accepting that. I think the reason why this album has stood the test of time and 33 years later, it's still doing very well. Cult of Personality, still getting a lot of spins on Spotify, people still going out to see Living Colour in concert, is because that combination of the extreme musicianship, the social consciousness in the lyrics, and also just the changing nature of America over the last like 30 years. And remember, rock and roll started with black people. Remember? Ike Turner, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, all those guys. You know, oddly enough, Vivid isn't even my favorite Living Colour record. I actually prefer their second album, Time's Up. That's my personal favorite in their catalog. But I think is awesome. I think their third album, Stain, they broke up after Stain, and then they got back together a few years later, 5-6 years later, and have been recording and making and touring for about the last 20 years or so. You know, like I said, I saw them in 2013. Right now, they are scheduled to play September, I think, 25th here in Omaha on some sort of package tour with Everclear and Hoobastank. I don't care for either of those other bands. I'm in it for Living Colour. I won't miss it. Vivid is just a stellar album from an amazing band. It doesn't sound 80s dated in any way. It still sounds super fresh and exciting, and it is the reason why people still hold that record in such high esteem. So your homework project is, if you haven't heard Vivid, you have to go out and listen to it. If you have, but you're like, you know, I never heard any of the other records, well, that's a mistake. You got to get into that. Also, they did a collection called that Sony put out called Live at Cbgb's, which is a concert from December 1989. It is amazing. Half the set is Vivid, half the set is what would become Time's Up, which when it came out a few months after that. Stellar fucking shit. They also have a live concert from like 2007 that I've seen on Spotify. I've never seen it on a CD or anything, but it's also really good. And go out and catch them on this Everclear tour, regardless of what you think of these other bands. Maybe you like them. I'm not trying to shit on them. I'm just saying, you know, it's not for me, but I love Living Colour, and I will be there without a doubt. All right, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you dug it. Take care. Bye-bye.